So wonderful to be back with you after being in Oklahoma last week, preaching up in Tulsa in a lecture series there. And it's wonderful to be back with you on the second Sunday in Lent. Linda started off the series, Reverend Linda McDermott, last week in such a wonderful way, both in the Ash Wednesday service the previous week and then last Sunday, the first Sunday of Lent. We're continuing in this series, which is based on the prayer of St. Francis, the prayer of St. Francis, which invites us to open ourselves to peace. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. And today we're focusing on where there is injury, pardon. Where there is injury, pardon. The central image in our text for today is the image of putting on clothes. It's something we do all the time, of course. We stand in the closet and we decide, what will I wear today? And we make our decision based on what the weather is or where we're going, who we will see, what sort of event we're attending, what's comfortable, what's easy, what fits. These are all the ways that we make decisions about what we will wear. But Colossians points us to something else. The Roman philosopher Epictetus said, "Know who you are and adorn yourself accordingly." Know who you are and adorn yourself accordingly. And Colossians, the writer of Colossians, would agree with that. First, know who you are, and then you know how to dress. The letter to the Colossians says, put on certain things. But before it says put on those things, it says you are beloved. You are holy, which means set apart for a special purpose. And because God has chosen you, and because you are loved, and because you are set apart to be God's people in the world, then adorn yourselves accordingly. Put on compassion and kindness and humility and meekness and patience, and above all these things, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. Now, the writer seems to interrupt himself after patience. Instead of going directly from patience to love, the writer says, bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And then he goes on and talks about love. If you look carefully, though, he's not really interrupting himself. What he's doing is he's saying what it means to be patient. To put on patience means a particular thing. There are a couple of words for patience in the Greek. This is the one that has to do with patience with one another. It is translated in King James Version, long-suffering. You may be familiar with that. In the Greek, it means long-tempered, patience with the other person. Long-tempered. That's what we are to put on as we would put on a garment as we go out to face the day. To be patient with one another is therefore to bear with one another. And if someone has a complaint against another, to forgive each other. Because God has forgiven, so we also must forgive, he is saying. The prayer of St. Francis puts it this way: where there is injury, pardon. It is a call to the difficult work of forgiveness. Now, forgiveness does not mean saying whatever happened didn't happen. It's not ignoring the past. That's not forgiveness, because it happened. And it's not saying that what happened doesn't matter, because it does matter. Otherwise, there would be no need for forgiveness. It's not submitting oneself to abuse either. Forgiving doesn't mean continuing to be abused in some way. If you're in an abusive relationship, get out of that relationship. Get to a safe place. Maybe then there's a possibility of working on that and some kind of reconciliation. And by the way, forgiveness does not necessarily mean reconciliation. Reconciliation takes two, and maybe that's not possible. Forgiveness is something that we ourselves do. A few years ago, we had a series on forgiveness that was based on research, scientific research, into this whole area of human relationships. Big study, big project sponsored by the Templeton Foundation to look at forgiveness. And the best definition for forgiveness that I've ever heard came out of that study. It is the difficult, intentional process of letting go of one reality and opening oneself to the possibility of a new reality. Let me say that again. It is the difficult, intentional process of letting go of an old reality and opening oneself to the possibility of a new one. Now think about that definition a little more carefully. It's difficult to forgive. That's the first thing. Oh, it's not difficult, of course, to forgive some little slight. But it is extremely difficult to forgive something that really matters, that's really important, that rises to the level of injury, to use the word from the prayer of St. Francis. It's difficult. C.S. Lewis said, everybody believes in forgiveness until they have to do it. Gandhi said that forgiveness is not something for the weak. It is only an attribute of the strong, because it's difficult. The second part of that definition is it's intentional. It doesn't just happen. That's why the image of putting on forgiveness, putting on patience, long-suffering, and bearing with one another, that's why that's such an important image. It's intentional. It's just as intentional as putting on an article of clothing. It's difficult, it's intentional, and it's a process. It doesn't happen just like that. There's no such thing when there's real injury involved of simply forgiving and forgetting. Real forgiveness is a process. And it's not just forgiving and forgetting at all. It's more like forgiving and then forgiving and then forgiving and then forgiving. It is a process that can last a very long time. And it's letting go of an old reality. At its heart, that's what it is. In fact, the Greek word forgive has at its root this notion of letting go or throwing away or doing away with. Forgiveness is letting go of an old reality, and that's the hardest part. To use Fred Craddock's image that he used in another context, it's like a baby with a piece of Scotch tape trying to get rid of the piece of Scotch tape. Think about that. You get it off of one finger by pulling, but then it's stuck on this hand, and then it's this. It's hard to let go of an old reality, and yet that stands at the heart of it. And then to open oneself to the possibility of a new reality. And that's the last step. That things can be different. That this grudge that is eating me up from the inside doesn't have to remain there. That things can be different. There can be a new possibility. Desmond Tutu, who of course endured all of the terror and terrible hardships of apartheid in South Africa, and helped create the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where people could face the perpetrators, victims could face the perpetrators, and they could tell their stories and tell the truth about all that had happened in the country, that enabled them to face that old reality and to let go of it, and then to be open to the possibility of a new one. Desmond Tutu wrote a book about that whole experience and about this notion of forgiveness. He published it in 1999, and the title was, There is no future without forgiveness. There is no future without forgiveness. And there's not. For that country, there was no future without forgiveness. For us, we open ourselves in forgiveness to the possibility of a new reality, a new future. To me, the most powerful symbol of that, or one of the most powerful symbols of that, is the Coventry Cathedral in England. Because what they did was, after the Blitzkrieg, after the old cathedral was destroyed in the bombing during World War II, they left the ruins of the old cathedral instead of razing them, and they left some of those ruins standing, and they built next to it the new cathedral, so that you have to pass through the old reality to enter this new reality. You pass through the old reality and you leave it, and you enter this new reality when you enter that new cathedral. And in the old reality there is a cross, and the cross is made out of old timbers from the roof structure of the old cathedral, scarred and charred, and on it is a sign that says, "Father, forgive." The words of Jesus from the cross. Letting go of the old and opening oneself to the possibility of a new reality. It's difficult, it's intentional, it's a process. Now, it's interesting that the writer of Colossians would choose to use clothing as an image, and I think the reason for that is it is intentional. One puts on clothes intentionally. And I think it's also the case that the clothing we put on somehow shapes us. It's not just that our bodies fill out the clothes and the clothing takes the shape of our bodies, but the clothing that we wear also affects us, doesn't it? Emotionally, mentally, perhaps even the words we say and the way we act. I mean, if I'm dressed in this robe, I am probably quite different than if I'm in, a pair of shorts doing yard work. It's just going to be different. I'm going to feel different, and in some ways will be different. That's true for all of us, that the clothes really do, in a sense, make us who we are. And so the writer of Colossians is saying, intentionally put on these aspects. And then those aspects that you have put on will more and more become who you are. You will become what you put on. And put on, he says, forgiveness, patience, and bearing with one another. Forgiving as God forgives. The prayer of St. Francis puts it this way: where there is injury, pardon. So what do you wear when you go to a place and a time where there's injury? People show up at injury wearing all kinds of things. I've been amazed through the years to see what people wear when they go to injury. Sometimes they show up wearing this fire engine red outfit with chains and all kinds of sharp weapons hanging from it called revenge. What a thing to wear to injury. It just makes it worse. I mean, I've seen people walking along with that outfit and the tools are scraping and bruising their legs as they walk. Sometimes people wear the sort of sickly yellow outfit of dissension. And they have a big mailbag kind of looking outfit, and it's got cards in it, and it has cell phones of all things in it. What a strange outfit. And you follow along and you realize that they are writing stuff on these cards, and they're dropping text messages and cards along the way. And what they're doing is they're just dropping little messages that make the injury worse. Turning people against each other, dropping little ideas that instead of leading to forgiveness, lead to further strife. And if you watch, occasionally they will whisper behind the hand to someone else. It's a weird thing. Dissension to wear to injury? What good does that do? Sometimes people will show up wearing a grudge. A grudge is this dark, ugly, gray outfit. It's lined with lead, so it's very heavy. It has all sorts of Velcro fasteners on it. It's hard to get off. This thing called a grudge, and sometimes people show up wearing that to injury, and I just don't see what good it does. Or they show up in the regalia of self-righteousness. Now that's a grand-looking outfit. It looks like it's made of the most expensive, finest cloth, but you get close and you realize it's just a cheap imitation. And it's not held together very well. The seams are about to come apart. They're just held together by a little thread. And if you look closely at the material, you'll see that it has words woven into the cloth. Words like anger. Words like judgmental. Words like unforgiving. And words like unforgiven, too. Sometimes people will show up wearing guilt and shame. That's a weird outfit. It's kind of a patchwork. It's a patchwork of some heavy, heavy material, and there's itchy wool to go along with it. Very uncomfortable. And to top it off, it has buttons and belts and snaps and Velcro all over it. It's nearly impossible to get off, and often it takes someone else to help get rid of that one. Guilt, shame, that's a terrible thing to wear to injury. But sometimes somebody shows up and they're wearing a beautiful outfit and it's free-flowing and it's lightweight and it's comfortable and it fits them so well, and they're at peace as they are there with injury. Sometimes somebody's trailing behind them and they have a similar kind of outfit on, and you realize this is the injured and this is the one who did the injuring, and there has been this sacred exchange called forgiveness. Well, the thing is, I noticed in my own closet, all of those garments are hanging there. Every one of them. And it's my decision. Perhaps if they're hanging in your closet, it's your decision every day to decide, what am I going to wear today? Amen.